most survivors of childhood sexual abuse don't come forward about what happened to them until decades later, if ever. In fact, the average survivor doesn't speak up until age 52, according to the organization Child USA, often too late to take their abuser to court. In this state, survivors must file a lawsuit within 35 years of their abuse or within 7 years after discovering emotional or psychological damage caused by it. But a bill before the legislature aims to get rid of that statute of limitations altogether. I'm joined by the lawmaker behind it, State Senator Joan Lovely, and Catherine Robb, Executive Director of Child USA's advocacy branch, Child US Advocacy. Senator Lovely, Catherine, thanks so much for joining me. Senator, I wanted to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what this bill does exactly and why you felt the need to bring it forward today?
Well, thank you. Yes. And actually, what it would do is completely eliminate the statute of limitation on the civil side for claims of sexual abuse against both individuals and institutions whose negligent supervision led to the sexual abuse of children. So against the individual and any institution who was overseeing children and there was negligent supervision that led to an employee, a contract laborer, whoever might be associated with that institution, whether it's a school, a youth serving organization, a church, whatever it might be, so that the survivor could bring an action at any time in their lifetime.
Catherine, can I ask you, based on your advocacy work, working with survivors, what does this bill mean for survivors?
Well, it means that the truth can come out, and it also means that children are safer. I talk to survivors all over the country, sometimes all over the world. I speak to someone new almost every week. I hear the exact same thing, and it's this: I just don't want this to happen to another kid. And so I think when we pass this type of legislation, which we've been doing all over the country, survivors not only have some sense of accountability and justice, but they have a sense of relief that finally their lawmakers are paying attention to the data and doing something about it and holding institutions and perpetrators accountable.
Senator, can I ask you, why did you focus this bill on civil cases as opposed to criminal cases when it comes to the statute of limitations?
Well, I did file a bill actually on the criminal side as well. It's a little more difficult to move that. We had actually done some statute of limitation reform here in Massachusetts back in 2014 when we raised the age to 53. But I was new to the legislature. I was in my first term then. I followed this closely, but I always wondered what was the magic age of 53. It was a negotiation actually at the time that was agreed upon to raise that to the age of 53. I don't think that there should be any age. It should be based on evidence and to be able to bring an action. And it should be retroactive. It shouldn't be for actions that going forward. It should be for actions that are older. For instance, for example, I am a survivor of child sexual abuse at the age of 6. I did not meet that age 53. I was older than that when we passed this law back in 2014, but that wasn't about me. This is about so many survivors, as Catherine had stated, who have come forward. And we listen to these survivors. We're advocating on behalf of these survivors. And for those who have the courage to be able to bring an action, they should be able to do so.
Can I ask, would this potentially run into any problems from the Supreme Court precedent about applying these laws retroactively when it comes to repealing statutes of limitations?
If I could jump in there, Senator. So
Yep.
the highest court in Massachusetts has already determined that this is constitutional. So we have a very good case, the Sliney case. And our Supreme Judicial Court has ruled that it is in fact constitutional, and lawmakers have the authority and power to pass legislation that protects our children.
And one thing that I'm sure you've heard from skeptics, is that the reason statutes of limitations exist is because evidence over time erodes, becomes less reliable. What would you say to those skeptics who worry that defendants might have to or might face unfair jury trials?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, we have the rules of civil procedure. We have the rules of evidence, and they are safety nets, right? Plaintiffs have to survive a 12B motion. And I think most importantly, I think what your listeners should know is that these are not your typical torts. These are not a slip and fall case. This is not a fender bender case. These are very, very different. These are the type of torts that are horrendous. And the very act by the perpetrator silences the victim. And we believe that perpetrators should not be rewarded for the silence they create in their victims. That's just not good public policy, nor does it protect our children moving forward.
Catherine, you also mentioned that you hear across the country when you talk to people that what they really want is for this to never happen to anybody else. Obviously, on top of accountability for perpetrators, one thing that survivors of child sexual assault often face are law enforcement failures to properly document these crimes. Do you think there is room for any legislation or anything to accompany this bill to bolster law enforcement and improve those or correct those failures on the part of law enforcement when it comes to reporting these crimes?
Well, let me say this much. There's always room for improvement. We can always do better when it comes to protecting our children. But I have to share that our criminal system has limitations that our civil system doesn't have. And this is why we've passed revival legislation in 26 states and 3 US territories already. So the vast majority of states are moving in this direction. And what I mean when I say there are limitations in the criminal side, we have a higher burden of proof. Less than 10% of claims that are reported ever end up moving forward to prosecution, and about a little less than that end in a conviction. So because of the structure, and also our constitutional rights of ex post facto and all of that, there are just limitations in the criminal side. And I might add that when was the last time you saw an institution go to jail, right? I mean, really the way institutions change and protect children is when they know that they will be held accountable. We saw this in the Sackler family, Purdue Pharma. We see it all the time across for all other sorts of wrongs, that the only way bad actors will clean up their acts is to by the threat of civil litigation. And that's the power of our civil system, right? And certainly we should have that power used to protect our children.
Senator, I wanted to ask you about the reception this has gotten on Beacon Hill. What have you heard from your colleagues? Do you feel confident that this is something that the legislature can pass?
So this is a refile. We have filed this in the past. It has received hearings. We've had very strong testimony, very powerful testimony from a lot of survivors who come in and share very detailed stories of when they were children, how they were sexually abused, and why they think that this legislation is so important. And so I have talked to many of my colleagues. I have the ear of leadership who is looking at this and other bills that I have filed to be able to, again, put more layers of protection in for our children. Currently, according to the CDC, across the country, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys experience sexual abuse in childhood. Those numbers are staggering. And 90% of survivors don't come forward again until about the age of 48 to 53, when the statute of limitations has usually run certainly on the criminal side and perhaps on the civil side. We want to make sure that people have the opportunity to be able to bring an action when they are ready to do so.
Catherine, I wanted to ask you, you've mentioned that you're an outspoken survivor of child sexual abuse. I think one thing that people often, struggle with is understanding why it takes people so long to confront the trauma that they hold. Can you talk a little bit about why people take so long to come forward?
Sure. I was abused as a little girl for about 8 years by a family member, which, by the way, is the biggest pocket of where abuse occurs. And, just shame, embarrassment, trauma. The nature of trauma can really silence kids. And I think when it happens in the family as well as in a church setting, you know, where those trusted adults are someone that are revered in the neighborhood or revered by your family members. So it becomes really difficult to indict that particular person. And I think just overall shame, embarrassment, and trauma. We now understand the nature of trauma and what it does to the brains of young children.
And Senator, I just have one last question for you. This bill obviously focuses on child sexual assault. When it comes to adults who face sexual assault too, is there something that you think needs to be done there when it comes to the statute of limitations?
I do. I believe that there should not be a statute of limitations based on these crimes, and certainly on the civil side. It should be up to the victim, who I refer to as a survivor, that they should be able to bring an action when they are ready to bring an action. I can't bring an action. My perpetrator is dead. But that shouldn't preclude anybody from being able to bring an action when they are ready. This is so rampant. 90% of, as I said, 90% of abuse goes unreported because people can't admit to it or come to terms with it until they're well into adulthood. And they have faced a tremendous amount of trauma, as Catherine had said, including drug abuse, alcohol abuse, so suicide. It's really critical that we bring this to the floor. I'm talking to many of my colleagues. Colleagues have shared with me that they are also survivors of sexual abuse. They have not made that known, and I would not make that known. But people are they feel encouraged that this is being discussed. There's a tremendous, as Catherine said, there's still a tremendous amount of stigma. We have to break that down. We have to talk about this, and we have to take action.
Senator, Catherine, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank
you for having us.